Oh my, Starry-Eyed Surprise. Is that not the cutest darn boat that you ever did see? But what is it and why am I here? For that, we need to jump back in time. So 3, 2, 1. I'm feeling a bit like a mariner this morning. No, not that kind. More like the kind that is about to cross the Puget Sound and or its associated waterways 7 times today. Hence, why I'm down here at the ferry docks. I need to follow that sign for the Kitsap Fast Ferry to get next door to Pier 50. After I take a nice long glance at the still dark skyline, I walk down the step and I could go in right there, but I'm painfully early, so I got something I need to see. Oh yeah, that's the kick in the pants I needed to get going this morning. I turn back around and make my way to join the queue for my first ferry ride this morning. Just kidding, it's just me and the staff here currently. Oh, I think my boat just arrived. Quite a lot of people are headed into Seattle at this hour. Once their disembarkation is complete, I'm given the go-ahead to walk down the pier and board. And yes, only I was given that instruction as this is my own private ride aboard the MV Enate. They have the booper just inside the vessel this morning, and much like me, it's taken a bit to wake up. Once it does, I boop to pay the $13 fare, as I'm departing Seattle, and walk to find the perfect seat. There are several to choose from. Do I want the airline-style seating in the middle? Looks comfortable, but not for me today. Having a table seems nice, but it's missing something. There we go, a table and a window combo. The MV Enate debuted in 2020 and is one of the agency's newest boats. Fitting as it's running on the Seattle to Southworth route, the agency's newest ferry route, which debuted itself on March 29, 2021. With the vessel's top speed of 37 knots, it takes 22 minutes to complete the crossing. This is one of only 2 of Kitsap's fleet that's built for both loading/unloading from the sides and the bow. We'll see why that's important on the other side. Before I get too distracted just taking the ride in, oh, there's power on here, I figure I should check out the facilities. I'd consider the vessels as pretty no frills overall, just comfortable seats and a couple tables and a comfortable environment. Oh, and 2 restrooms. And I gotta say, they run a tight ship around here. It's pretty much spotless. So what's the plan for today anyways? Well, Kitsap Transit currently has 5 total ferry routes, 3 of which are cross-sound fast ferries like this, and 2 are local foot ferry routes. I'm also trying to avoid taking the same route twice, keyword being trying. So I will also be showcasing 4 different Kitsap Transit bus routes and 1 Washington State Ferry route, just for the heck of it. Is this a speed run? Not really. In general, I'm going to be taking this to Southworth, connecting to the Bremerton, Port Orchard area, back to Seattle, up to Kingston, back to Bremerton, back to Seattle. We'll see how it all goes. The forecast for the day looked clear and sunny, but between some high-level smoke and a bit of marine layer, I can barely make out the Washington State ferries in the distance there. Kitsap Transit likes to name their vessels after boats that sailed the Puget Sound in years past. In this case, the Enate was named for the former Washington State Ferry vessel, which sailed this very route at one point and has its own rich history. That vessel was named for the community of Enate, it seems, which in turn was named for the Chinook jargon phrase meaning beyond or across the water. Before I even know it, I see the dock right ahead. Southworth is the only fast ferry landing that uses the same exact dock as the Washington State car ferry, which is why it was required for the ferry to have both side and bow loading areas. Pretty nifty. And personally, I just love the drama of the approach this way. As the crew is tying the lines up, I take one more twirl to express my gratitude to Enate for the ride, before the doors in front open up and I make my way down the pier. Holy smokes, look at all the passengers headed into Seattle. It's one thing to read about ridership, but it's a whole other to actually see the ridership. It's just a little after 6 a.m. and I'm already 20% done with the mission. Hey, there isn't really a terminal building or anything here at Southworth, and due to some current construction, the buses don't stop near the shelter and instead are down the way a bit. In true KT fashion, my bus is already here waiting as transit schedules are heavily based around the ferry times, making connections a breeze. Time for me to board this Gillig operating on Route 186 towards the Port Orchard Ferry. I boop and make my way towards the back of this mood-lit vehicle to find my seat back by the Gillig bar. I won't be taking this to its terminus, though. I'll be departing at the Port Orchard Armory Park and Ride to transfer to another bus in order to make a service that only operates at peak hours, and those peak hours are pretty early in the day. No need to worry about that yet, though. I have what I'm expecting to be a fairly scenic ride ahead of me on here. The blue lights on here are already a vibe. Once we leave the terminal area, we follow Southworth Drive on its twists and turns to make our way towards the shores of Puget Sound. The sunrise trying to break through the clouds and the haze gives the view of Blake Island and the water stretching out before us from the Harper area here an almost Stephen King sort of feel. The views continue with a few glimpses of Yukon Harbor as we pass through South Colby. When Southworth Drive becomes Mile Hill Drive, we make a deviation onto Colchester to serve the community of Manchester. The village, like many on the banks of Puget Sound, used to have a ferry service of its own provided by what is affectionately called the Mosquito Fleet. Small boats shuttling passengers, mail, and even cargo between hundreds of ports all around. Manchester even had ferry service to Alki and Seattle until 1936. Now the community's claim to fame is the nearby Manchester Fuel Depot, the largest single-site Department of Defense fuel terminal in the continental United States. We complete the deviation and loop back around to Mile Hill Drive, and these information screens are great. Showing the next 5 or so stops and their ETA is honestly really helpful. This section of the peninsula is rather rural, with homes on large lots nestled into the trees. But that changes as we get closer to Port Orchard, with more suburban characteristics taking over. But that also means it's about my stop. Well, shucks. That's my bus that I was supposed to catch. I stand up to exit the bus, thank the driver, and watch it depart before I even worry about my plan potentially falling apart already. If Destiny's Child taught me anything, it's that I'm a survivor. I'm gonna make it. I walk across the street to the bus stop on the other side in front of the Armory Park and Ride. Call me a Luddite, but sometimes I just love a physical schedule, especially when it tells me that a different route will be here in a few minutes, taking me to where I need to go. I'm going to choose to thank Chief Kitsap for making this happen. Right on schedule, a Gillig begins to pull on up, turns on its reader board, the doors open, I board, boop, and make my way to my preferred seat at the back. This vehicle is going to serve me well for the 5 minutes this trip is planned to take. With one other passenger joining me here, we're off heading back east on Mile Hill Drive. Even though it's short, I was able to relax here immediately. Can you blame me with this sort of ambiance? Moments later, we turn north on Olney Street to pick up several passengers immediately, which continues on as we make our way to our terminus at the Annapolis ferry terminal. We pass the Veterans Memorial Cemetery and some homes, and moments later, the road ends at the banks of the Sinclair Inlet. Cheese and rice, that is one heck of a morning glow. As we turn, we're pretty much immediately at our stop at the ferry terminal. I get up and exit the bus, following the rest of the crowd that departs the same bus, before I remember I need to at least look at the bus before I leave it behind. I wouldn't have felt right if I forgot. Annapolis is a small, unincorporated community almost completely surrounded by Port Orchard, and there really isn't anything around besides, I guess, all this beauty. As I make my way to the end of the pier, I see my next ride is already here. The good old Admiral Pete will be taking me on the run across the Sinclair Inlet to Bremerton. We single file on, boop, and board. The vessel is pretty small with some bench-style seating. I initially take a seat just to get out of the way, but then I realize I wanted a better view. Feeling the wind on my face just feels right. The 5-minute crossing only operates on weekdays at peak times. And like I said, those peak times are a bit earlier than the standard commute times, which is why I was worried about missing it. I didn't want to wait until the afternoon to get it completed. Built in 1994, the Admiral Pete was named for the former Puget Sound Naval Shipyard Commander, William Francis Petrovic. I know in reality it might be a pain to rely on it, but could you imagine this being your commute every day? Most of the other riders were like me, kind of just lost in thought, just looking out into the water. Sinclair Inlet is absolutely stunning. Fun to see the little boats scurrying all around, being framed by the Manette Peninsula there, the Waterman area of the Kitsap Peninsula there, and Bainbridge Island back there. I didn't want it to end yet, but 5 minutes goes fast. Soon the pier is approaching, and before I know it, we were right up against it, and the crew opens up the gate, and all of us passengers scatter ahead. My next ride leaves in just a few minutes, but thankfully I don't have to walk far. Hold it. I forgot to get a look back at Petey. Thanks for the great ride, Admiral Pete. Whoa, that was quite the time jump there. Now we are back watching the Carlisle II pull into the dock here in Bremerton. I stand by what I said. This is the cutest little boat that I ever did see. I'm just grinning from ear to ear as I'm so excited to ride the floating museum that now is only the backup vessel on this Bremerton to Port Orchard foot ferry route. Once passengers have completely departed, it's time for us. We file on, boop, and board. It's even more charming on the inside. It's honestly almost overwhelming. Like, is transit intoxication a thing? I promise to show more of it later, but right now, I have a one-track mind. I climb up the stairs and out into the fresh air. What can I say? I'm a top deck kind of guy at heart. For some reason, I like that it looks like they used standard off-the-shelf garden benches. Just seems practical for something exposed to the elements. We pull away just as a large group of passengers are boarding the fast ferry to Seattle, and as the Kaleetan gears up to leave for its run to Seattle as well. I even caught Admiral Pete on its last morning run to Bremerton. From the water here, it's easy to see just how big the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard really is. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, as it has over 14,000 personnel working there, making it one of, if not the largest public shipyard by workforce in the nation. This 12-minute crossing operates roughly every half hour. Just keep an eye out in the evenings. Service ends by 4:30 p.m. on Sundays, 9 p.m. on weekdays, but at least on Saturdays it lasts until almost midnight. This is exceptionally important as there are no other transit service between the two cities. Port Orchard creeps closer, and soon we're floating right near all the boats docked at the marina. There are even two of Kitsap Transit's other boats here, the Lady Swift fast ferry there, and the hybrid electric MV Waterman foot ferry that normally operates on this route. And look at all those Gilligs lined up ready for a seamless transfer. I don't know if I'm more excited about the docking itself or the view of the inlet while we do it. Well, guess I should head out. One day I could just ride back and forth on it, taking it all in. All of these vintage photos of the Mosquito Fleet make my imagination go wild, and the windows make the scenery look like works of art themselves. But it's time to go. For now. Don't fret though, I'll be back on here shortly. Yes, I could just board again right away, but I just have to wait on the other side, so I decide to go out and stretch my legs here. Walking down the pier, I naturally walk towards the green and orange Gilligs. Pretty impressive seeing this many routes, considering they are completely disconnected from the rest of the land-based transit network. But really, KT seems to understand how to build the network around ferries. At least theirs. The timings are just superb. I can spend about an hour here in Port Orchard before I need to catch my ride back across the water. But I need to take care of some business. Like, I need some energy. That's a con to the fast ferries compared to the state ferry fleet. No galleys. The downtown area near the port is just downright pleasant. The historic main street through town probably doesn't look that much different than it did during the height of the Mosquito Fleet. Maybe that's why the town's main festival is called the Mosquito Fleet Fest. I let out an audible ooh, passing a bakery. But as I was worried about my lack of self-control around delicious baked goods, I figured I shouldn't cause a crash out so early. Is that a model of the Kaleetan? What a wonky vessel that I wish I could have rode. I ended up opting for convenience store coffee. Maybe I don't have the best decision-making skills after all, but I did get to chug it down next to the water. I don't think you're ready for this jelly. I don't think I'm ready for this jelly, because your body is too wet and viscous for me, baby. All right. Time to meander back to what has become my favorite boat. Is that the Scanian flag? Oh, and there's the Ha Tu Dabi Memorial Totem Pole, carved in 1989 by Frank Smith of the Makah tribe to commemorate a local journalist and community activist. Time to check out the pier and its basic facilities. Well, this is it. There are about 7 benches around, some in a shelter of sorts with windscreens around, but not much else. At the end of the pier is the booper, so that's where I wait. Looks like there are some staff working on the pier there and the watermen. Maybe it's undergoing maintenance today? Is that why I get the pleasure of the Carlisle II? Look at that. Peanut butter jelly time, peanut butter jelly time. Soon, I see another vessel approaching. Oh! It's just the Admiral Pete coming in for its midday siesta. There's my ride back there. We got Thomas the Tank Engine and Lightning McQueen, but where's our personified boat friends? I watch it for a few minutes as it gets closer, and I gotta admit, I'm really impressed at the clip of which it pulls up close to the pier and docks. The staff seem incredibly competent at their job, and watching it pull in under the diffused light of the sun really just adds to the magic. When it's ready and the gate opens, I boop and make my way to board. The Carlisle II was built on Lummi Island in 1917 to ferry passengers and cargo from Bellingham to the Carlisle Salmon Cannery on the island. Just 6 years later, it was rebuilt into a car ferry, and then in 1936 it was bought by Horluck Transportation, who converted it back to a passenger-only boat and operated it on the very same route that it serves today. It was eventually sold to another businessman in 1995 who invested in some upgrades before Kitsap Transit bought it in 2008 to use it as needed on the Bremerton to Port Orchard route. It is the last Mosquito Fleet vessel still in active public service and one of only 2 of the vessels still surviving. It is also likely the oldest continuously licensed wooden vessel in the United States still running. So cool. New hybrid electric vehicles are probably superior for a multitude of reasons, but to say that I'm enamored with good old Carl here is an understatement. So I just hang out on the top deck, just soaking up the experience as we say goodbye to Port Orchard and hello to Bremerton again. Yes, that is a vessel just leaving on the run to Seattle that I'm taking next. Missing it is no big deal, as I just have to wait on the other side anyways. Just 2 minutes later, we're at the dock and it's time for me to disembark. You know I lingered to make sure I watched the endearing vessel leave on its next run. This screaming dock also made me chuckle pretty hard. I'm easily amused. According to this real e-ink display, I have 27 minutes before the next ride and the coffee is hitting, so time to do a quick lap around the waterfront. It's nice enough down here. Lots of boats to look at, some new ferry TOD built out on the little bluff there, and at the end down there is the Forrest Sherman class destroyer, the USS Turner Joy, decommissioned in 1982 and is now a museum ship. Time to start trekking back towards the fast ferry terminal. The signage here is really good and easy to understand. Before long, I see the vessel speeding towards me and I know it's time to start queuing up. Once it's ready, I boop and board the MV Reliance. I walk to the far side, past the onboard restrooms, past the only seats with a table there, to the front of the boat, and get my seat in the corner. This boat will be taking me back to Pier 50 in Seattle in approximately 30 minutes, about half the time as the state car ferry. The Reliance is the sister ship to the Lady Swift, which both debuted for service on this route in 2020. It is named after, you guessed it, a Mosquito Fleet steamship that once serviced Kitsap County and connected it with Seattle before a fire brought it to its demise in 1926. As we press through the Sinclair Inlet and into Rich Passage, it looks like the skies may actually clear up today. We'll see. Oh, there's that Manchester fuel depot I mentioned earlier. Maybe I spoke too soon about the skies clearing up. Dreary, yet still oddly beautiful. Looks like we lost Alki to the fog, though. One thing to note. Beginning September 1st, 2026, 7 sailings in each direction will be canceled. Well, technically they were temporary to help with capacity as the state ferries were having some issues with their own fleet. The temporary sailings were even actually extended through the summer to help with the World Cup, but it's still sad to see. We enter into Elliott Bay and get a quick glimpse of the skyline, but it's another con of the fast ferries. The views can't quite reach the level of the Washington State ferries. If all goes to plan, that's why I'm saving it as a reward at the end. Speaking of WSF, we pull into our dock in tandem with one of them as they pull into theirs. So, I have about an hour here before my next ride, so you know what I gotta do. Say it with me. Stretch these legs. The skyline is looking great from here. You too, Habitat Beach and Spirit of Kingston. Made it just in time to watch the Reliance head back out on its way. May as well check out what is happening next door at Coleman Dock. The new terminal has been open for a couple years now, and how are there still empty retail spaces? There is a captive audience here with nothing else to do. At least inside is getting better in that regard. The facility itself is really nice though, bright and open with great views. There is a newish Just Walk Out mini mart. The new coffee kiosk is extremely popular, and there are plenty of seats, restrooms. It's just pleasant. I could wait here a bit longer, but may as well join the queue next door for my last Kitsap ferry trip of the day. I walk to the start of the line to check out that my trip is still on the reader board, never hurts to double check, and make my march down the blue roped stanchions, making sure I filter myself to the line for Kingston. The West Seattle water taxi loads and departs first, and then my fast ferry arrives, and it's time to board the Kelly Rowland. The MV Commander. I'm so lost in thought about the time that Kelly tried texting Nellie via her flip phone but was actually just using Excel. So iconic. Almost as iconic as the ferries on Puget Sound. But that also caused me to boot my phone instead of my card, which caused the recording to stop, so thanks, Kelly, for that. But it's alright, as the Commander is the sister ship of the Enete earlier, except this one debuted slightly later in 2021. I try to compensate by doing a bit of a twirl up front and then just sit my behind down at the table in the front left. Nice to get some juicing in. There isn't any Wi-Fi on any of Kitsap Transit's vehicles though. Just an FYI. Just 15 seconds late, we're pulling away from the dock to start our crossing over to Kingston, scheduled to take about 40 minutes. Leaving Seattle may cost $13 on the Kitsap fast ferries, but headed to Seattle only costs $2. If you are looking to save a few bucks, just be aware of that. Soon we're leaving the city and Elliott Bay behind as we head into the main channel of Puget Sound. The MV Commander is named after the General Frisbee steamship, which originally provided passenger service in the San Francisco Bay area before Bridges reduced its usefulness on its Vallejo run. It was then sold and towed to Seattle, where it was renamed Commander and ran between Bremerton and Seattle for like 5 years before it was sold again to be moved to Alaska and used as a floating salmon cannery. What a life. We've really sailed straight into the fog here. Can't really even see the land on either side. The stubby thumb was not enthused about that. But what am I gonna do? After about 30 minutes, the dock at Kingston is coming into view. Although this ship is also equipped with the bow loading doors, it won't be necessary here as we have a separate dock from the WSF fleet. We end up pulling up right next to the MV Solano that I rode a couple of months ago, and in mere seconds, we're docked and it's time to exit. It is now 11:21 a.m. according to the timestamp on this video, and I have completed all 5 Kitsap Transit ferry routes. From when I booped while boarding the Enate at 5:42 a.m., I completed this all in 5 hours and 39 minutes. I'm not calling this a speed run, but I couldn't find any info about anyone else doing this, so I'm considering myself as the current world record holder. Feel free to let me know if someone else has been able to do it faster. Now, if I had credits, this is where they would roll as we gear up for the post-credit sequence of getting back to Seattle. Yes, I could just turn around and take the ferry back for only $2, but where's the fun in that? This video is all about Kitsap Transit after all, so I may as well show off a couple more bus routes, right? Just past the terminal building is my ride waiting for me. Once the driver themselves wraps up their own break, it's time to boop, board, and find my usual seat towards the back. This is Kitsap Transit's Route 307, which is timed with the fast ferry between here and Poulsbo's North Viking Transit Center with limited stops. We loop around to exit the ferry terminal and run on the back side of the cute little port area to merge up with Highway 104 through the standard suburban area of the community. But then 104 turns north and we continue on straight onto Highway 307. We are flying down the tree-lined highway, and I'll tell you what, it's nice. Just take this in for a second. There isn't much to see along the route, but it is efficient, taking just less than 20 minutes to reach our bay at the North Viking Transit Center. The transit center is located to the northwest of Washington's Little Norway, Poulsbo, but it's not really convenient to much of the city. Although it does provide transit connections to 5 different KT routes, as well as Jefferson Transit's Route 7 and Clallam Transit's 123. The straight shot. After pacing around a bit, getting my steps in, I make my way back to the transit center and try to figure out what bay I should head to. They don't really label it on site anywhere, which is a little confusing. Later, I did find this diagram though, which helps, and the layover buses themselves do have their reader boards on. Not only am I going to board the same bus that I came in on, I have the same driver and the same fellow passenger. I boop and take the same seat as before. This is Route 301 and it travels from here at NVTC to Bremerton Transportation Center via Silverdale. But first we have to do this strange little deviation to the Olympic College campus here in Poulsbo, only to head right back to the NVTC, just again to head back that same way, but this time we head south on Highway 3. Weird. We join up with what is essentially an access-restricted freeway to make our way south. Soon we exit the freeway in the unincorporated community of Silverdale to circle through the Silverdale Transit Center. It looks actually really nice. Pretty good service too, with 9 different KT routes all serving that stop. Leaving the TC, we turn in front of the large hospital serving the county before we meander around various parts of the community and even passing by the Kitsap County Fairgrounds as we make our way over to the now stratified Highway 303 as we press south. This part definitely feels like a slog, even with our limited stop service on the line. With that said, we do stop at park and ride lots like this one that we pull into, McWilliams Park and Ride, and this one, which we pull next to, Wheaton Way Park and Ride. Just about 3 minutes later, we reach what I would consider the highlight of Route 301, crossing over the Warren Avenue Bridge. Port Washington Narrows below connects Dyes Inlet to the Sinclair Inlet, and therefore the rest of Puget Sound. It's quite nice. From there, we loop into the main campus of Olympic College, which has its own little transit center of sorts. We head a few blocks south, and then seconds later, we're pulling into the Bremerton Transportation Center, getting a pretty good view of this end of the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. The route is timed with the Kitsap Fast Ferry and not the Washington State Ferry, which I was hoping to catch. I make a beeline straight for it, but the doors are closed. Looks like I'll need to wait for the next one. Wah, wah. May as well walk through the main passenger waiting area here. It's pleasant enough in here, especially considering there are quite a few restaurants and shops and such just outside. It's got a customer service desk, plenty of seats, good windows to watch the foot ferries doing their thing below, and restrooms. I decide to step outside watching another ferry depart and decide to explore a bit. I walk north through the transportation center, heading over to catch a better look of the Minette Bridge connecting the neighborhood of the same name to Bremerton. Just a block over or so lies the heart of downtown Bremerton, 4th Street, really focused on the experience of the pedestrian with plenty of benches and seating mixed with streetscape plantings, even art/instruments to interact with. Across from the Roxy Theater is a stage really making the area a festival street, and pretty much right next door lies the Kitsap History Museum. I'm glad I took this little deviation. Now, time to head back. It's really cool watching all the employees of the naval shipyard coming in and out of these tunnels. Something like 60% of the shipyard's employees are civilians, after all. I continue to saunter towards the ferries, taking the time to soak in all the fountains here along Pacific Avenue and the PSNS, and then the Navy Museum. From there, I decide to just relax in the glass-sheltered walkway watching the WSF ferry come in, see the crew switch out, watch the passengers disembark, and then it's time for me to board my last ride of the day. And I'm stoked about it. One of the best things about this is that heading towards Seattle, it is free for walk-on passengers like me. No need to boop or anything to board the MV Kaleetan here in Bremerton. And this one is one heck of a beautiful vessel. It just looks sharp, much like the mountain peak it is named after. With a capacity of 1,868 passengers and 144 vehicles, it's definitely spacious. Just look at all these seating options. The tables with the puzzles, especially if next to a big window, are a personal favorite. No time for me to sit though. There's a top deck that I need to find. So I climb up the stairs and arrive next to some restrooms and the galley. They serve all sorts of food and refreshments, everything that one could need for the roughly 60-minute sailing. I have a favorite spot to get to though, right up front and against the windows. Since it's covered and semi-enclosed, it's the perfect spot to just zone out and enjoy the ride under any weather conditions. Right on schedule? We're off. Washington State Ferries has been running this route since its inception in 1951 when it was known as the Navy Yard route. But of course, there were several predecessors, two of the most well-known being the Inland Flyer Steamboat and the Bailey Gatzert Sternwheeler. Overall, today I've had an absolute blast setting what may be the world record time, riding all 5 of Kitsap Transit's ferries. For commuters, or heck, even those just out on an exploration, what's not to like about connecting South, Central, and North Kitsap County directly to downtown Seattle in about 25 to 40 minutes, all in new comfortable vessels right on the water. Then you have the 2 foot ferries that make the short jaunt across the Sinclair Inlet. Sure, the Annapolis route is really just geared for commuters, but there really isn't a need for it otherwise. And the span of service on the Port Orchard run does leave something to be desired. But those 3 rides on the Admiral P and the Carlisle II made me forget about anything negative. Kitsap Transit might need to keep an eye out for Nick Cage because the Carlisle II in particular is a national treasure. Also, Kitsap Transit is currently in process of studying 2 new passenger-only ferry routes, specifically connecting points within the county. One potential option would be connecting Bremerton and Silverdale, and the other would be a Bremerton to a Bainbridge Island route, which they think would have higher ridership due to latent demand. I'll be keeping an eye out as Kitsap Transit slowly resurrects the historic Mosquito Fleet. As we press across the main channel of Puget Sound and into Elliott Bay, forget about what I said when I decided to ingest the convenience store coffee, because I definitely made the right choice, at least here. I'm gonna say it every time I arrive into the city by boat, Seattle looks best coming in from the water. So, do I feel like a true Mariner? It had some ups and downs, much like the average Mariners baseball team season, but I think overall it was a massive success. And after an hour on what I might consider the best attraction in all of Washington, we are pulling into our slip at Coleman Dock. As I watched the walkway get lowered, I figured I should get walking myself. I follow the crowd of passengers leaving, but then I had to see if fate brought me a KT ferry at Pier 50 to foam over. No such luck, but there were a couple King County water taxis. Oh, and a jelly. I just love when things come full circle. So, would I do this trip again? I sure would. Get it? That's the 113 to Shorewood. I'll show myself out.